Hey everybody, Daryl and Holly with Exquisite Exotics here. Sorry for the missed video last week. We got crazy busy and just didn't get a chance, I'll be honest with you. But we're back. Part 3 of our our genetic series. All about recessives this time. So 103, we did a 101, a 102, and a 103. So there's a playlist for those. If you are just finding this video and you haven't watched the other 2 videos first, please go do that, because we're going to pick up on things we've already talked about in those 2 videos. We're not starting from scratch here, so you really need to have that base information down where we talk about kind of basic genetics, the codoms and the doms, and now we're getting into the recessive stuff. So I don't want this video to be as long as the last one was. It ran longer than we were really hoping. So without further ado, let's go ahead and we're going to get set up with that board and go over recessives. All right, just like our other videos, proof, I'm here. So recessive genes. What I want you to think about for our recessive genes is recessives. Geez. Recessives work a lot like superforms do. So remember in our last video we talked about if you have a superform, like a super fire, for example, all the babies will come out looking fire. Recessives work the same way in that they carry 2 copies of a gene. Just like the super fire carries 2 copies of fire. In this case, we're going to stick with our recessive being albino, as was our example. So a recessive visual albino has 2 copies of the albino gene. And then when you hear the word het, that's short for heterozygous. Again, I try not to use too many scientific terms in here, but there is a specific word in that we use the word het for. Het basically means it's only carrying 1 copy of that recessive gene. With recessive genes, for you to visually see the recessive gene, they have to have 2 copies of the gene. So an animal that is visual albino actually has 2 copies of the albino gene. An animal that is het albino is going to look normal and carry 1 copy of the albino gene. So, and per our previous videos, there are only 2 versions of recessive animals. They are either visual or they are a het. Ignore the percentages that you see out there for hets right now. We'll get to that at the very end of this video and I'll explain what those percentages mean. But just keep in mind you have 2 options. They're visual or they're het. When the recessive is a visual, 100% of the babies will get 1 copy of that gene. So an albino visual animal, all their babies will have 1 copy of that albino gene. A het albino, 50% of their babies are going to get 1 copy of that albino gene. So if you remember, we talked about a super fire bred to a normal will never produce another super fire because it can only hand down to its children 1 copy of that fire gene. Recessives are the same. Even if you have a visual albino, if you breed it to a normal, you will never get another visual albino because it can only pass down 1 copy of the gene, and it needs 2 copies to be visual. All right. Hopefully that was clear. Let's get into Punnett squares, and I think will continue to make more sense. I know we did Punnett squares before, so we got 5 set up we're going to do. First would be a visual, in this case albino. Anytime you see the word visual, that we're assuming the visual albino, just because that's what we're using for our recessive. And if a het, it'd be a het albino. So visual albino to a normal ball python. So visual albino will always pass on 1 copy of its gene. In this case, we're going to use albino, so we're going to put a lowercase a. I use lowercase letters for recessive genes. A lot of people do.
That looks like a Q.
Yeah. And a normal will only ever pass on a normal gene, so we have an N. Right. So if we do our lines... Oh, and Holly drops the pen. Technical error. All right. So when we fill in our letters, that means we have a normal het, because we only have 1 copy of the albino gene, het albino. So if you breed a visual to a normal, everything you get is going to be a normal het albino. 1 copy of the albino gene means it's a het. 2 copies for a visual. All right. That was pretty simple. Remember, visuals, 100% of their babies are copying on gene. Now we have a het. So we have a het to a normal. We'll do the normal first. It's a simple one. Okay. Het, 50% of the babies are going to get one copy of the gene. Okay? So 50% of the babies are going to get an A for one copy of your albino gene. And the other 50% of the babies are not going to get a copy of the albino gene. So it's just going to get an N for normal. Fill in our squares. Okay, so over here, 100% of our babies were normal, het albino. Over here, we have 50% of our babies, because we have 2 boxes, right? So 1 out of 2 is 50%. 50% of our babies are normals, het albino. The other 50% of our babies are just normals. They carry no het for albino. As you see in both of these pairings, we still have yet to create a visual albino animal. Moving on to visual. Okay? So visuals, 100% of the babies are going to get an albino gene, A. Same for a visual. 100% of the babies are going to get an albino gene. Fill in our blocks.
Not in the way.
No, you're good. You're good. People will be able to see it once we fill it in too. All right. Visual, 100% of the babies get an albino gene. Visual, 100% of the babies get the albino gene. 2 copies of the albino gene. So just like our codoms when we talked about superforms, 2 copies means this is visual. So if you breed a visual albino to a visual albino, 100% of the babies will be visual albino because they have 2 copies of that recessive gene. So this is our first pairing where we get visuals, and the only thing you get out of it is visuals. Okay, moving on to our other Punnett squares. Visual. We know that 100% of the babies are going to get a gene. Het, so we know 50% of our babies are going to get a gene. Albino gene and a normal. Make our blocks. A, and A. Okay, a visual to a het. We only have 2 options. So, 1 out of 2. 50% of our babies are going to be visual. They got 2 copies of that albino gene. The other 50% of our babies are going to be normal, het albino. They have 1 copy of the albino gene. So you're getting the seed here, right? You are not seeing that percentage that people, I think, get confused about the most, where they think it has something to do with once they have a percentage, it's going to change what they're breeding. No. It either is a het or it isn't a het, and it's a visual. And everything you breed is going to produce either it is a het, or it isn't a het, or it's a visual. You only get 3 options out of it. One last pairing. Okay?
Let me go ahead and
Yep.
fill it in.
Always filling it in. So hets, of course, like we did for the other ones. Half the babies, you're missing a square, Holly.
Oh. I saw
Okay.
that. I was testing you.
So a het-to-het pairing now. We get out of 1 out of 4 babies, and again, that's on average. 1 out of 4 babies are going to be visual. 2 out of our 4 babies are going to be normals, het albino, and we're going to get 1 just plain normal. Right? Those are our options. So if we look at our different squares here, there's only 2 squares here that give you percentage chances of getting a het. So here's where when you see 50% or 66% het something, here's where those numbers come from. So on this square, we know that everything from this pairing is 100% het. Everything that we can produce has at least 1 copy of the albino gene. In this pairing, we know we're going to get visuals, and if it's not a visual, if it's not albino, it's going to be a normal that is 100% het albino. Because the only option here is that if it looks normal, it is definitely carrying an albino gene as well. Visual to visual, of course, we already talked about. Everything is going to be albino. But these ones are the ones that cause the percentages. Here, from this pairing, you're going to get normals, and they're all going to look normal. But half of those babies are going to carry the albino gene, and half aren't. And ignoring the fact that some recessive have markers where you can kind of tell if they are or not. If you just assume that they all look normal, you won't know which of these babies are carrying the albino gene and which ones aren't. You're just going to produce a whole bunch of normal babies, and half of them are going to be het albino and half aren't. And here's where those percentages come from. So if you have babies from this pairing, they are 50% het albino, because 50% of the babies are going to be carrying an albino gene, and the other 50% aren't, and you have no way of knowing. I say no way loosely because people do use markers, but let's ignore markers for a moment. You have no way of knowing which ones are or aren't carrying albino. They either are or they aren't. Those are the only two options, but you don't know which they are. So you have to sell them as 50%. Excuse me. You have to sell them as 50% het, because there's only a 50% chance that that baby is carrying that recessive gene. The other common one you see is 66% het, and that's this pairing here. Okay? You have one visual. Clearly you're going to know that that came out albino. But you have 3 babies that came out looking normal. 2 of those babies are het albino. 1 of those babies is not. It's just a plain normal. So 2 out of 3, that's 2/3, which is 66%. So that's where people get 66% hets, right? So 66% of these normal looking babies from this clutch are going to carry the albino gene. And the other 33%, this little guy right here, is going to look normal but not have the albino gene. So when you see het percentages, it is the percentage chance that that baby is carrying that recessive gene. You will either A, over time, prove out that it is or isn't carrying that recessive gene. Those are your only 2 options. And once you prove out that it is, you can consider it 100% het at that point, because you know it is a het. It is only a percentage het until you prove that it either is or isn't, and those are the only options. The percentage chance does not affect the outcome of your breeding. What it's going to affect is whether or not you prove out that it is or isn't. The likelihood you prove out that it is or isn't carrying that recessive gene. So hopefully that clears up where all those percentages that you see come from. Hopefully this was a good overview of recessives. I think the fact that we already covered super forms of codoms, recessives work very, very similarly. And if you have any questions on recessives, go ahead and drop those down in the comments. So let me get this board out of the way. Let us get back on video, and we'll close out this video. Okay, so we've covered all the 3 types of genes now. Hopefully you understand hets versus and the percentages and what they mean now for recessive genes. So we're going to do one more video in this series, at least for now. The last video I'm going to do maybe a couple more complicated Punnett squares so you can see what happens when you start mixing multiple genes in there and all the crazy combinations you can get. But what I would really love to do is get some pairings from our viewers in the comments on this video that you would like to see in the next video. So that means I really need those by, let's say, Friday of this coming week. This video will come out on Saturday. I don't know what the date is off the top of my head, but Saturday the 8th of February, yes. And so I would need them by the following Thursday. If you have any pairings that you would like to see in the video, just put them down in the comments. Put, if you want to see a Desert Ghost pied pastel to a pinstripe, ultramel, het albino, sure. That's a crazy combo, and I don't think anybody's going to breed it. But anyway, if you want to see whatever pairing you want to see, just put it in the comments, and I'll make sure we get it in the video, and that'll give you good examples of what your real life doing. So this is your chance to interact with us and get exactly what you want to see in the next video in a Punnett square. And that's all the next video is going to be. So if you understand everything now and you're like, I can do this for any combination, the next video, honestly, you don't need. You're done. You're done. You've learned everything there is. You've graduated from Exquisite Exotics Genetics 101, 02, and 03. Da, 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 da. If I had a certificate, I'd hold it up. But all right, I don't want to make the video too long. As always, guys, we appreciate all our subscribers. Like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you know when we come out with a new video. New animals will be coming for sale here in the next couple months. If this is your first video from us, all of our animals go up for sale on YouTube first, and you get a discount the first week they're up for sale, 10% if you buy them in that first week. And they go here on YouTube before they go up to Morph Market. So you're the first ones with the opportunity to buy them. That's all I have. Holly, anything else? No? All right, guys, we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one. Bye.